Hey y'all, it's Nancy the Handy Scandy. Welcome back for another crafty venture. And today I bring you my process in making these 8 Thanksgiving projects using this beautiful stamp set from Simon Says Stamp. It's called Pumpkin to Talk About, and I stamp it and color it up 4 different ways. So let me first say that this is a longer video, so feel free to watch it in segments, speed it up, put me on silent, whatever you need to do, but I appreciate you watching in whatever capacity or way that you choose to. So on all of the watercolor card, that's what I'm using, and it is my Muwah watercolor card. And like I've said before, I'm using the good stuff, right? I'm not hoarding it and saving it for whatever special occasion that I hope to come. I'm using it. And you can see that I went ahead and stamped it out. I used my VersaFine Clair, and then I used it's kind of a frosted embossing powder. I believe this one was from Ranger. It ends up making this look like it's silver, actually. I think that's this one. We'll see though. Sometimes I forget, and you know how that goes. I made these, gosh, more than a week ago. So my memory in terms of what happened when and all the details may or may not be completely accurate. But at any rate, I have this sped up ×5, and I'm just doing all of that heat embossing, and you get to see it in its full glory, if you will. There is one technique, one process that never gets old to me, and that's heat embossing. The mess is always old to me, but the actual technique and the results never loses its magic on this girl, ever. So on this one, I stamped it up in Versamark, and I'm using rose gold. This is rose gold by I think this is Wow. So again, hitting it with my heat tool. Yeah, let's talk about heat tools for a minute while I let this play out. Tell me what heat tool you use and if you like it or not. So this is one that I picked up from Hobby Lobby. I guess it's store brand. It actually didn't have a label on it at all. It was packaged properly, but there was no like manufacturer. I don't think there was a manufacturer. At any rate, I had an old Stampin' Up! One. Can't remember who the manufacturer was, but it was branded for Stampin' Up! And it was great until it wasn't. And then I had to pick up another one, and it actually blew a fuse. And then I picked up this one, like I said, from Hobby Lobby because I had to have something. And it works. It's not fantastic, but it works for me. So y'all tell me what you have. Tell me your heat embossing gun story. Or do you use more of a heat tool like Tim Holtz sells, which his isn't specifically for embossing, but I know that you can emboss with it. But I also know Wagner produces a good one as well. Let me know. Let me know. All right, so this is panel 3, again using my Versamark. Look how dirty that ink pad is. I'm ashamed. This is the panel that ends up looking more silver than anything else. The first one was black ink and clear embossing powder. This is, oh no, gosh, I'm totally confused. The last panel was rose gold. This is regular gold. This is by Imagine. It's embossed, as you can see on the package there. I have just a little bit of this embossing powder left. I'm trying to finish it up. Now, that is not to say that this isn't a beautiful embossing powder, because it most definitely is. It's just almost gone. And you know how it is when you have something that's almost gone and you just want to use it up, but you're going to use it to the last grain. Well, that's where I am with this one. But again, stamped it up with Versamark, used my embossing buddy. As you see, I've used it on all 4 panels, and then I use that gold embossing powder, and it is just beautiful. Here again, using my Versamark, my dirty ink pad. And there's still plenty of black ink between the stamp itself and the embossing pad. I'm getting a black look. And now here I am. This is the one that ends up looking frosted and silver. It's not a frosted embossing powder. This one is from granger, but it ends up looking like a silver frost. And this is the one that I used for my watercolor, I believe. But we'll get there here in just a minute. So give me just 1 second. I'll heat emboss this and I'll be right back. All right, and now I'm going to be using my new to me Mailang watercolor paint palette. And I have sprayed both sides of my panel because I don't want the card to kind of buckle up on me. So by spraying it on both sides, that allows the panels to be saturated from both sides. And so if it's going to bend, it'll bend on whichever side is the most saturated, which of course in this case is going to be the front. But I work it out. Spraying that backside really resolves that problem for me. Now you can tape it down. You can use any number of methods to use or that you choose to help prevent that buckling. But for me, this seems to work the best. So I am just using whatever color tickles my fancy in the moment. Like I'm keeping it with autumnal pumpkin shades, but pumpkins can be all kinds of colors, y'all. And so I just allowed the moment to guide me. And again, I'm just using my watercolor palette and just trying to skip pumpkins in between the wet ones. Does that make sense? Because I don't, even though I have the heat embossing, and that helps to hold the color within the wells that are created when you do the heat embossing, I don't want to risk my pumpkins bleeding together. I want there to be definitive differentiation between each pumpkin. And so now I'm just coming in with deep, concentrated, dark pigments on my brush and just kind of dropping it in and going along the ridges where there would be shadows and just finishing up the painting. And so I'm going to put the rest of this particular panel to music and we'll just watch my process. If you have any questions and if I don't pop back in, please, please, please drop your questions downstairs or shoot me a message. Whatever the case may be, I'm an open book, not trying to hide anything, but also I don't want to talk your ear off. So let's just watch this process. Can you see how the outlines of the images are starting to look more frosty and kind of a silvery? It's interesting how that worked out because that was not what was supposed to happen, but serendipity, baby, happy accidents. Absolutely love it. I love all 4 panels, but the process of this one was just so soul nourishing. I don't know if you guys are watercolor people or not. I don't want to call myself a watercolorist or a watercolor artist, but I love to watercolor. And this just soothed my soul, this whole process. And then the outcome being as glorious as it is. And it's more because of the paper that I used, the image itself, the heat embossing. It's those things that made me look like I know what I'm doing. But it was just amazing. I love, like I said, all four of these panels, but this one nourished my soul. I hope that makes sense. All right, so now we're going to do a little bit of distress spray stains. Super simple, keeping it simple, not making it difficult, allowing the wells of the embossing powder to do their job. So you saw the colors that I used. I will try to be sure to list them downstairs in the description box, but no promises. If you want to know and you're not able to see them on screen, please message me and I will go back and I will do my research if I haven't already listed them. But again, here I am using my heat tool to help these spray stains dry. Now, I have to say, if you're not already aware, you will get a different result if you allow those, the pigments, basically the spray stains, to dry on their own. And that goes with no matter what type of medium you're using, if it's paste, if it's paint, if it's sprays, no matter what. At least in my experience, if you allow your mediums to dry naturally, organically, instead of hitting them with a heat tool, you're going to get a different result. So that one I set aside to finish drying because I did not fully dry it, but I dried it enough so that it wasn't soppy and drippy. Now, I have already heat embossed this one with VersaFine Clair ink and clear embossing powder, but I go back over it. I left my image in my MISTI so I could stamp right back over anything that I might have needed to, and I stamped over the heat embossing with the Vintage Photo Distress ink. And now you can see that I've also used that Elegant Writer, and between the two pigments, right, between the Distress ink, which again I use the color Vintage Photo, and the Elegant Writer, and I just use little dots and dashes, and then I hit them with just the spray bottle, and you allow them to bloom and blossom and grow and spread and bleed and all those beautiful things, and they create such a unique effect. But for me, I wasn't getting enough of that on this particular panel, and I believe that it's because I did the heat embossing first. So the Vintage Photo wasn't in the paper as much as it was on top of the heat embossing. So anyway, I let it continue to do its thing. You can see especially the Elegant Writer continues to bloom and blossom and spread, and I love that. But I sprayed some of the Vintage Photo out on my desktop, and I'm using it just to paint. And I'm going in around the edges and along the crevices and just trying to create shadow and depth and dimension and differentiate each pumpkin from the next. And I love that I'm using that same color that I stamped with to do the painting with, so that has that continuity. So again, I'm going to set this to music. We're just going to finish watching this process as I spray out a few more colors of Distress spray stains, and we're just going to color these in, and we're going to leave one highlight pumpkin. So let's watch that process. Yeah, I love watching other people watercolor and bring their images to life, but I don't usually find any therapeutic benefit per se. I am thoroughly enjoying watching my own process. Is that crazy? And here that panel is, loving that white pumpkin in the middle of all of those traditional orange and kind of burnt orange pumpkins. Love that panel. Now I had to take advantage of all of this ink that was on my desktop. So here I'm taking this panel and I'm doing the ink smushing and then just using the nozzle, if you will, of the hose on the nozzle. I don't know. What is that thing called, y'all? Anyway, you see what I'm doing. And I'm using more of the green than anything else. And I can't remember which green this was, and I've already put it away. I want to say that it's old olive. It might also be old paper. I'm not sure. I apologize. I'm sure I showed it on screen at some point. Um, but man, I've loved this process. And of course, you can see I'm just using that smushy mess on my desk to color in the pumpkin stems and add some shadow and some depth. Now, with the shadowing, y'all know I always talk about the fact that I'm not an artist, I'm not a colorist, but it's just very simple, right? If there's two images overlapping, there's going to be a little bit of a shadow where they meet. Right, and you can see that's exactly what I'm doing. The pumpkin that's in the back is going to have a little bit of shadow where the pumpkin in front overlaps it. So that's where I'm just kind of dropping in a little bit of that darker color. And you can see literally I'm just kind of tapping it down to my paper. But this is where I stop. I come in with a little bit more of that green again, just because I want it to be a little more prominent where I feel like it's drying back too light and too fast. So again, just coming in with some more of that, and then I'm going to call this panel done. And it is beautiful. I love all of them and found so much benefit. Now this is just kind of a side journey, if you will. I have already run my sleeve through my process a couple times, and these are my new Christmas jammies. But you know what? I am nothing if not consistent. I don't know, but I get ink and paint and mediums all over my clothes. But I could not let that paint go to waste. This I already felt like was a waste wiping that bit up, but my panel was already fully saturated, fully covered. So I went ahead and wiped up what was left, and then I come in with just a little bit more just to get some layers and some added depth and added dimension and deeper, richer color. I don't know about you guys, but I just can't let paint like that or pigment or whatever the medium, I just can't let it go to waste. How do you guys feel? I went ahead and added some extra layers to this to give it some more dimension, give it some more movement. I allowed it to dry organically, and it's still waiting here, or sitting here waiting on some love. I think what I want to do is, I don't know if they call it reverse stenciling or color lifting, but where you use a stencil and you lift the color off of the paper using like a wet wipe or something like that. In the meantime, let's look at these panels, and then we're going to jump on into the projects. I have to say, this is a really good time for an intermission. If you need a break, go to the bathroom, whatever you need to do. But I'll meet you after this and we'll talk. All right, guys, so after I finished painting those panels, I decided that I wanted to go ahead and make them into some projects, and that is exactly what I have for you. I have several projects. So this is the first one. This is the pink gold embossing. You can see that. And I have used a variety of different papers and products from my stash. The papers I don't necessarily have out here, and I don't even know where they came from, but I will share some of the products. So this is a button from my stash. This is ribbon from my stash. I have more of that here. I don't have any more of these buttons though. And again, like I said, I don't know where the paper came from, but I did line both that background panel and the pumpkin panel with a layer of black. I thought that was really pretty. And then I pulled out different little sparkle gems from this set. This is called the Pink Champagne Sparkle Gems from This Calls for Confetti. I used kind of the iridescent ones, and this one was clear. I just thought I would use it for just something a little bit different. But the clear one definitely puts off a different vibe than the ones that have kind of the iridescence to them, but I just think it's so, so pretty. Now this was the one that was spray stained, and you can see where those stains just kind of settled in some of those wells that were created by the heat embossing, but I think it's super pretty. I love it, love it, love it. Now this is the one that was done with the vintage watercolor, where I stamped and heat embossed in, I stamped it in black, I heat embossed in clear, and then I went back and I stamped again in vintage photo, and then I used the, what is that called? The Elegant Rider to go along and add just some extra detail. And then when you hit the Elegant Rider with water and you hit the Distress ink in water they both kind of blend and bleed out and do their own thing. But then I went back with some different colors of spray stain, and I used them as watercolor paints, and I painted in the panel, and I just think it turned out beautiful. I love this white pumpkin in the midst of all of that. And you can see I added a couple of grommets here. I used different dyes to layer up my panels, and I used black in between each of them. And then you can see these these aren't sparkle gems, these are confetti. These are from Simon Says Stamp. I don't know the name of it, but I think it was part of the, is it a kit basically that was for Simon Says Stamp collaboration with Tim Holtz for his Christmas class. I think these were in that, and I've used them on a couple different cards, but I just thought that they were very, very pretty and that they worked well. And I just used a bulb pin and a little charm out of my stash. Now the charms that I used really don't make any sense to the projects. I spilled my stuff everywhere. Spilled both of the bins that I have all my charms and pins and whatnot stored in, and my son picked them up, and I'm very thankful to him for doing that, but I have not sorted them back out. So I just kind of pulled out whatever fit the color, basically. But that is that project. Now, this one is the very first panel that I did, and I watercolored it with those beautiful new watercolors from Muwah that were inspired by Anna White. And you can see the different panels or different pattern paper that I used in the background. And then I added this little strip of holographic paper in between the strips of pattern paper just to create that differentiation. And that kind of pulls this silvery embossing out. And you can see that I use those same confetti. And I used some twine. This is the twine that I used. I wrapped it around a few times and pulled a button from my stash. And I used a little too much glue. You can see how it's kind of warped. I may go in and try to stabilize that a little bit more somehow, but I think it turned out really cute. I really like that. So that's the third one. So this is, again, the spray stain. This is the vintage watercolor, and then this is the actual watercolor. And then this was the ink smushing. And then I had heat embossed in regular gold. This was heat embossed in pink gold or rose gold. And then this one I just did it in regular gold. And then I did the ink smushing and went back in with, did I use a paintbrush on it? I don't remember, to be fair. I know that I just used the nozzle of the different colors in different places, and I love the way it turned out. And you can see that I layered just a piece of gold specialty card behind this layer, and of course I stamped on that. And then I used my little tool that was inspired by Anna. Now this one is not like Anna's. This one is more of a leather working tool. It's the only one that I could find. I have several, but this is the only one that I could find in my stash. And then here you can see I used some more of those sparkle gems, and they did come out of this same container. And then I did a little grommet, and I used some of this beautiful fibrous trim that I got from Temu, actually. And you can see that I used a piece of gold glitter stock to kind of bridge between the two panels of of pattern paper that I used in the back. And that is all that I've done on that, but I think it's really, really pretty. So those represent the 4 panels that I painted. The distress spray stains, the vintage watercolor, the watercolor, and then the ink smushing with distress spray stains. Now, I had plenty of leftovers. I still do. In fact, these are the leftover bits that I still have. So I have this piece. Let me move these up and out of the way just a little bit. So I have this piece. This is the rose gold embossing. This is the regular gold embossing. It goes this way. And this is some more of the gold embossing. This is the clear embossing that turned out looking silver. And this is the black embossing. So I have all of those bits and pieces that are still left. But then I also have these bits and pieces of the background panels that I made. And I just think they're really pretty. And I may or may not end up using them on something. But I like the way that they looked. So I have those. What I'll do with them, who knows. They will likely just go in my little bin for now. But I wanted to share them with you. So this is part 2 of this panel. You can see actually that they went like that. But I just think they're beautiful. Or maybe it did go this way. I don't even know anymore. But I just think that they're so, so pretty. And I'm not sure which one I prefer. Maybe this one. Y'all tell me. But you can see that I layered each of the watercolor panel as well as the background panel. I layered them with black. And I used just another piece of pattern paper down the middle to bridge those two. And then I used this natural trim that I tea-dyed. And then I stamped the Happy Thanksgiving. This one is just on white. This one is on a piece of pattern paper, the same one that I used for there. And I just love the way they both turned out. Again, I used some more of those sequins or confetti. And then I made this tag that I think turned out lovely. And this was with the same panel as that. And just different pattern papers from my stash. I stamped Let's Give 'em Pumpkin to Talk About. I thought that was super cute. Layered this with black, added a piece of the trim, and then I love this die from Simon Says Stamp. Now on the back, this is a piece of paper from a 12 by 12 pack, and I just used some spray stains on it just to make the colors coordinate. Now this was a piece that was matte background, and then these flowers were kind of like a raised embossed. And so when I sprayed it, it did emboss resist, and I think it turned out beautifully. And then I added some trims and some different charms from my stash, and that's where I'm saying like they don't really match. They don't coordinate, but that's what we have. So there is that one. And again, it coordinates with this card because it's the second panel there. So we have the ink smushing. Let me put it this way. We have the ink smushing. And then over here we have the watercolor panels. And then I have this one, and this is with the embossed resist. So again, similar, they're the same papers for the most part. Layered it up on black, added this gold trim, and then this gold piece of lace. Used another die set from Simon Says Stamp. The same Let's Give 'em Pumpkin to Talk About stamp from Simon. And then I stamped it on that pattern paper. And I don't remember who the pattern paper is by. But this one is just backed with just a white one. And again, more trim from my stash and silly little charms that make no sense. And that coordinates again with this one with the vintage photo. And then the very last one that I made is this card. And that is with the pink heat embossed and the ink smushing. Or no, it's not ink smushing. Just the spray stains. And this trim has been in my stash for forever and ever. Amen. This panel right here was sent to me by my sweet friend Mary Alice in West Virginia. And I've had it in my stash for the longest time. And I thought this was perfect for it. And then I layered that background paper on a piece of kind of a summer sun yellow. And then I die cut these leaves out of gold specialty paper, and this button was already glued on, and I just think it turned out super cute. Now I did not put a sentiment on this one, obviously, but there it is, and I didn't add any kind of gems, but I really like the little, the button, of course, gives it that rustic look, and then those gold leaves. Now the gold leaves are very different from the rose gold embossing, but I just felt like it worked. At least in my book it works. So those, my friends, are my projects that I've made with those 4 panels that I painted up using this stamp set from Simon Says Stamp. It is one of my favorites in my stash. It's called Pumpkin to Talk About. These are some of the sentiments that I've stamped out over the years. But Let's Give 'em Pumpkin to Talk About and Happy Thanksgiving were the ones that I used. And then I have these, piece of that pattern paper. I use these dies from Whimsy Stamps, Quick Strips. I use these tags that I purchased off of Amazon recently. I did stamp out this Give Thanks from Honeybee, but I did not use it. I've also used this die set from Whimsy called Mix and Match Scallops die set. And I use this, again, one of my very oldest and most used die sets. It's just a stitched rectangle die from Creek Bank Creations. I did not use that, but I did use both of these. The Buckeye leaf and the etched oak leaves. I used both of those. And I used, as I mentioned, this little pack of sequins, and I used my grommets, and I used this pack of sparkle gems from This Calls for Confetti, as well as this twine, natural polished hemp number 10, and that is it. Those are the main things that I've used. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope that you have enjoyed these projects, because they are likely the only Thanksgiving cards that I'm going to make this year. So I think I'm ready to finish putting away all of my fall, Thanksgiving, Halloween. I'm ready to put it all away for now. But guys, let me know if you have a favorite. I know you guys have already voted on your favorite panels over on the community tab, and I thank you for your participation over there. But let me know here if you have a favorite of these projects. And until the next time, I'm going to go ahead and let you go. And again, I thank you. And until then, mwah, this is Nancy, the Handy Scandy, and I'm out.